you've got the presence of such people among you. The third one is migration. Myself, Colin, and Gerald, as I said earlier, are part of a group called the Pan-African Network in Defense of Migrant Rights that was launched about 6 months ago in Bamako. If you were to look at sort of the global migration trends, the United Nations estimates there are 230 million people who live outside their birth country. And this could be that a person who was born in Swaziland now lives in South Africa, right? That's different. So you've got the internal migrations continental, but what's really alarming is that the numbers in the course of human mobility, right? People move all the time for whatever reasons, but that this number has doubled over the last 25 years, which means all indicators are for the next 25 years is when migrations are going to increase without doubt. And these are not migrations because people feel like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to go to Europe? These are forced migrations. Most people have no choice. We've seen it in the United States in conversations. It's clearly global. And that framework, that this is a global phenomena, has not really been part of the U.S. conversation. And I think it's important for all of us when we talk about climate and justice and militarization and gender and all that, that all these are sort of interrelated, right? The last one is land rights and food sovereignty. And I'm sure this list could be expanded by several more, right? Very easily. And they're all interrelated. But the issue of land rights, in a relatively recent, seriously radical policy changes, you've got African governments signing these bilateral deals with countries like Qatar, which is a tiny land. Qatar is like so small, except for Al Jazeera. Nobody even knows where it exists, right? In the middle of this desert island, desert in Saudi Arabia, you've got Qatar, which just leased for 90 years from Ethiopia several hundred acres of land, farmland, that they need to ensure their own food security for their own people over the rights of these people. So the governments are making these agreements, completely bypassing the process of the rights of the people to the land. And you know that whether you're from Africa, anywhere in the world, land is not just what you produce food and water.
That's right.
It's your identity.
That's right.
And people are being forcibly moved off of their land. Their land is being taken away. It's being fenced, like high-tech fences and all kinds of solar power and all kinds of stuff happening, and where people cannot even go to farm and to take their cattle to graze because it's all been board controlled. And I think this is, again, seriously threatening the concepts of sovereignty, of African sovereignty, that are multiple trajectories that are hitting the continent at multiple forces. And if ever there was a globalized level for solidarity and challenges, these are the moments that we need to realize the connections that we have. I mean, in conclusion, I'll just say that the history of the struggle between the United States and Africa was really sort of cemented and framed within the anti-apartheid movement, right? That was the time, in support of South Africa, most people knew that they understood the racial divisions, right? It's immoral, it's inhuman. How could they have the system of complete separation? We understand that because we were there yesterday, right? Selma, Alabama, Pretoria, I get it. Literally black and white, right? And these kind of parallels allowed people to galvanize a huge, enormous, mass movement, which almost immediately dissipated, once Mandela came into office. Yeah, we won. There are new forms now of struggle within South Africa, within the sort of romanticized, nostalgia that people have of the good old days of the anti-apartheid movement. People don't even want to connect with the anti-apartheid, with the privatization or the groups in Soweto. And you've got a whole bunch of new generation kids that don't even know the word apartheid. And I'm not kidding, this was asked by a professor friend of ours at school. She said, what's that foreign word you're using?
Wow.
You know, it's, even the word apartheid is sort of not well understood. So you've got the growth of new generation, the youth, the whole hip-hop movement that has come out of the resistance of the civil rights movement, which is so highly revered within the youth of, you know, Africa and elsewhere, not understanding the context of which the resistance has given rise to this form of rebellion, which is what hip-hop. It's not entertainment. It is a form of protest, right? So I'll just conclude here to say that, you know, there's a lot that we can do and learn from the work that we do here. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Nunu. So we're just going to open it up to any comments or questions now. I don't really see any yet. No, top.
Yeah, that was really helpful. You know, in our, I have a question. In our Indigenous Environmental Network, many of our constituencies have gone like to Geneva, to the United Nations, and some of our indigenous peoples throughout the world have been like fighting for this recognition of the rights of indigenous peoples. And so in that process, there's been tribal indigenous peoples from the continent of Africa participating in this. And there's many tribes like the Khoi, the Khoisan people from South Africa, for example, or the Maasai from Kenya. And so, and of course we know the story that most colonial governments resisted the recognition of S on peoples, the collective rights, not the human individual right, but the collective rights of people to have land, tenureship, language. And so that's why S on people has been very critical to indigenous people to be recognized collectively. Now, US resisted, Australia resisted, New Zealand resisted. They even put pressure on UK, in UK to support this resistance against the universal recognition of S on people. Now Africa, many of the countries of Africa also joined in this, said we're all indigenous from Africa. But their resistance at a colonial perspective is that they didn't want to recognize the rights of tribal people in Africa to have standing, political standing. Okay, so they join into that fight of resisting. So I'm just wondering, how do we network and look from the framework of working with tribal or indigenous peoples of Africa? Because there's an indigenous peoples coordinating committee that's going to be here with representation from different. So how do you relate with those indigenous peoples fighting for their rights within the African Union, who doesn't recognize still that colonial is kind of like black on black, or we have that brown on brown issue in Latin America. You know, how do you convey that so we can have better understanding of that? Yeah. And then the role of religions as well, because we have that. That's my second piece. In the United States, and we struggle with, because we had our original understanding of our relationship with the cosmos. We had our own. We didn't have Christianity. That was a foreign concept. Okay. So here in our networking, we met people who are trying to recognize their own long ago traditional ways of prayer. Yeah. Not Islam, not Christianity, but their own. Yeah. So I'm just wondering how that fits into the politics of existence in Africa.
Wow. That's a lot to respond to, and I'm sure Walter could probably.
No, I would just say, without having a long discussion about it, that the Africa Union is a work in progress. I mean, it basically started in 2002, and the two groups that brought together the African Union